Hey, welcome back to another edition of Video Game Tester 101. And from the title, you could probably see it's a little bit clickbaity. It's about something about fighting as a video game tester in the workplace. So I want to talk a little bit about my experiences when it comes to fights as a video game QA over my over the course of the years. So let's just get it out of the way. I've never come to a point where I actually came to blows with anybody at work. So, no, I've never actually physically fought somebody. Now, I've heard stories. I've heard stories that it's very, very common, depending on the company and stuff like that. I heard stories where like somebody took a monitor or TV and was about to throw it on someone's head. They knocked him down. They were in a fight and knocked it down. And they took the monitor or TV or something and about to throw it on someone's head. And other coworkers had to get involved. And so there's even there was at one of the jobs, there was like a fight policy where if a fight breaks out, you are not supposed to do anything. You're supposed to not intervene because then you can be held accountable and you have to go get management and stuff like that. And it was one of those cases to where, somebody was about to get their head crushed with a television because depending on where you are back in the day, we used big old televisions and stuff like that. Or just getting their head crushed by anything, and somebody would intervene. But we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to just not get involved and tell management. But so I wanted to talk about my personal experiences about how I almost got into fights at work, and I have three particular stories. So I'm going to break these three stories up into three parts, because it's what's interesting about this is that in a weird way they're each related to the other. They're at different companies. But somehow, in a strange way, they're related to each other in their own way. So let's talk about the first part, and this is probably going to be the bigger part, and the other two parts are going to be much smaller because they're not as flashy full and not as fanciful of a story. But the first time that I almost got into a fight at a job as a video game tester, video game QA, was at my first company was SCEA, so to Sony Computer Entertainment of America in San Diego. Now, I want to just give out this disclaimer. When this happened at the time, I was in my 20s. I was a young man. I'm an old man now. I have three children, three teenage children. And by no means, if anything of this sort would have happened to me today, I wouldn't even think of violence. I think violence in these particular cases is like something a dumb man would do. A person who doesn't have the thought process to think about tomorrow because they live off of emotions and very foolish. So yes, I admit I was a very foolish man and I regret how I was back then. But nonetheless, I'm just sharing with you how I was. And the truth is I'm ashamed of that guy. So I wouldn't never condone violence. But I am going to share with you how that went about. So we were working on a sports game for the PSP. This is when the PSP first came out. I think it was called NBA 07. I think that was the one that it was. So we had a group of guys. And so there's this one particular guy. I don't really remember his name too much. And it doesn't really matter because I wasn't fond of him at the time anyway. But he was a real opinionated guy. He had strong opinions, and he wouldn't hold back. Oh, this is whatever, right? So he's just known for that. So one of the tricks in this basketball game, NBA 07, was I figured out that I just from muscle memory, I figured out that if you go to the 3-point line and you can just do it a certain way every single time, you would be really good at hitting these 3-pointers. If you don't know what I'm talking about, if you're not a basketball fan, I'm not big on basketball, but I know what I mean. Then just go along with the story. But so I got really good at just hitting these 3-pointers with whoever, right? Because what else am I going to do? Like, I'm trying to break the game. I'm testing this game, so I want to see how I can abuse it. I want to see. So I was doing my job really well. And so one of the tasks was to team up with another person that was with me in my pod and test, the multiplayer function. And so we were testing the multiplayer function. We would, try to let our machines find each other and we would, play a game. And so what I started doing was the same thing. I was just hitting 3-pointer. I wasn't really playing the game. I would get the ball and I would go and I would just hit a 3-pointer. And he would try to do all this and I'd try to stop him, right? And so I just kept doing that over and over and over again. So what had happened was, I don't know, I was like killing him. I was killing him. And so he started getting really upset. He was getting upset, and you can kind of tell. He went from talking a lot because he was jabbering. He's like, yeah, this is, we're having a good time, whatever, to just being quiet. He was just quiet. He was irritated. And I was just hitting these 3-pointers. I was pretty much like Larry Bird. Bah, 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 bah. And I was like way ahead of him. And he was getting irritated. And so he started like insulting me in a specific way. He started saying things like, ugh, you're just like my son. Because he had like a son that at the time was like 4 years old or something like that. He's like, just like my son. Just, I was like, what do you mean by that? He's like, you're playing like a child, man. Like you're irritating, man. Just like my son. And, it goes to say how much he respected his son, but whatever, right? So basically he was saying that I was being childish by hitting these 3-pointers over and over and over again. And I was like, bro, I'm just playing the game. I don't know what to tell you. They made the game like this. It may not have been fun with them, but this isn't a real game, dude. We're testers. We play this for 8 hours a day. Like, he's taking it serious. It's like taking it to heart. Whatever. So I was like, whatever, man. Right. And so I don't remember too much of the back and forth, but I was like, whatever, let's just finish the game. And so I beat him and he quits, right? He's all upset. He's da-da-da, right. And now I'm in a bad mood. I don't want the story to come off like I'm this innocent guy that's just like, oh, I'm so innocent. I was a young buck myself. And one of the biggest things that I didn't really care for in my youth was disrespect. Disrespect to a young man who, is aggressive. It's a big deal, So this guy, he's just off talking in the background, whatever, dude, he's punk, blah, blah. And I was like, all right, because I had just got into Sony, and there was like obviously a no fighting policy because they mentioned it, and I was like, I don't want to lose my job. Like, I just left GameStop, and I'm now getting to do this dream job, and I'm not gonna fight this guy. To because of what, right? Because I understood the value, but still, like, the young part of me still was like, oh, I was like boiling on the inside. And so there was a particular time where he was just going off and he was just complaining about everything. He was in a bad mood. He was like a big mouth guy, and I had made a comment which involved profanity. I'm not gonna use the profanity, but basically he had made a comment where. People are acting like, let me reverse the word here. Let me make it family safe here. People are acting like a bunch of witches, and everybody was kind of silent. They didn't want to say nothing. They didn't want to confront him. So I made the comment, something on the lines of, you're the only witch acting like, you're the only witch witching, I hope you guys can decipher that. You're the only one, the only witch witching about anything, right? And then he went quiet. He didn't really like the fact that I stood up to him, and I was like, man, just shut up, And now the tension was in the room. We were really aggressive. And now the room was quiet, and so he sits down for like 2 minutes, and he gets up. He gets up and he goes right into the manager's office. And he goes into the manager's office, and I don't know what he said to the manager, but I have an idea what he said, so I'm gonna share that with you in a second. So he goes in there, he complains. Next thing you know, the manager's like, "Hey, Lawrence, can you come into my office?" Da da da. And so let me, before I tell you what my manager said, let me kind of just paint a different picture here. So there's 2 sections of QA or game testers. There's 2 sections, and they're kind of like think of it like 2 rooms, kind of like there's a there's a room and there's a wall and there's like another room. So it's kind of like that. And so the room I was in was full of like laughter and joy and fun and, people with free spirit. And the other room was filled with like people who didn't really like to talk too much. They didn't really know each other. It was quiet. It was like a library. And so we were lively in this lively section. So the manager goes, "Hey, Lawrence, I'm going to go ahead and move you into the other section because it seems like there's some problem there." And I was like, I tried to make my case. Well, why do I got to move? He's the one that did this. He's the one saying that. All I did was say this and this. And so apparently, like, the manager was just like, "Yeah, I know. He was just trying to resolve the problem." Like, I get that. He was just trying to resolve the problem. So he thought that resolving the problem was just by moving me. So this, I almost called him a crybaby because I was getting a little bit upset just thinking about it. But the truth is that, he was the one that came to the manager first. So therefore I'm the one that gets to get removed. And so I got removed and I got moved into the next room where it was library time. It was, it was like a monastery. It was quiet. And so this is where I kind of want to emphasize the dangers of, if you're a young person or if you're a person with anger issues or a person who gets frustrated or angry really quick, I want to emphasize the value of self-control, because this is what happened. I was in this room with a group of people having a good time for a really long time, for months on end. Now I'm put in this other group of people who are super boring. It's super quiet. And so now I'm spending my 8 hours a day in this quiet room with people who just don't talk, and sometimes I would try to talk with them, but they just weren't, as lively. I didn't really build a rapport with them like the other room. And so now I'm getting heated. I'm listening in the other room. Like, you can hear the other room. And you hear like, "Oh, yeah, woo-hoo." They're having a good time. They're laughing. And all I'm doing is I'm stewing. I'm stewing because this guy, got me removed from that environment and moved to this other environment. And now I'm with the boring gang and he's with the fun gang. And I'm just angry. And so something happened during this time. And this is something where I do regret. But now, as I told you at the beginning of the story, I've never physically had any altercations. So, but let me take you to a place where my mind went. I was so angry at this guy. I was so mad at this guy that I'm talking for days, probably for like a couple weeks, 8 hours a day, think about ways to jump him. Like, think about ways to fight him and not get fired. That's all I would do. I would stew in my anger. So I'm thinking, okay, if I get here early and if I can find out where he's parked, I can I can meet him in the parking lot and I can beat him up. Because this guy wasn't a big dude. He wasn't a big guy. And I was a pretty big guy at the time. Like, he physically didn't intimidate me. He was just this skinny, lanky guy with just like, he had a big mouth. Right. So I wasn't worried about this dude. So I would think, okay, so if I get here early, I wait in the parking lot and I could beat him up then. Nah. Cause then then I have to resolve it, like, what happened? Okay. What if, I beat him up after work, right? So it's like, hey, no, I could just lie and say, oh, I went home or whatever, right? So I was thinking of all these ways. Like, what should I do? Should I slash his tires? Should I break his window? Should I, I don't know. But it was like, all I can do is think about ways to violently hurt him and stuff like that. And eventually, like, I never did anything. And which is good, because that's how idiots end up, in prison. That's how idiots end up in places where they don't belong, because because I know I started out this story with, I'm not going to get in trouble because I really like this job. And I think it was that particular thinking to where I had an idea that I wanted to make it somewhere. I really wanted to make it far in the video game testing industry. And so it was probably that desire to do something greater past Sony that kept me from acting out like this young 20-year-old idiot that wanted to physically hurt somebody because they overall up-and-ended my whole wonderful experience with Sony. So nothing ever came of it. I hated the guy to the very end of time. Never spoke with him. Obviously, he never spoke with me. We didn't like each other. And then the project was over, and it was like one of those things to where I even thought about, this is how crazy I was at the time. I even thought about trying to figure out a way to find out where he would be outside of work so that I can hunt him down at like, let's say, let me see if I can overhear him being at the mall on Saturday. And then I would go to the mall on Saturday and I would beat him up. Like, those were the thoughts. Like, I didn't have anything else to do. I was playing this basketball game. I don't like basketball. It wasn't fun anymore because now I'm in the boring club and I didn't have anything else to do but think about ways to try to hurt somebody else, and I was just going nuts. So I can't say I'm proud of that, and I'm glad I didn't do anything because if you guys look at some of my previous videos, I talk about the progression that I have with QA and how it's led me to what I am now, which is a QA automation engineer and stuff like that. So had I even indulged in those small moments of violence, who knows where I'd have been? I could have, I don't know. I don't even want to think about it, right? So here's a lesson to you guys. When you are in a room and you're a video game tester, you are going to be with people you just don't like. And you're going to probably put in situations to where you just are filled with utter hatred. And I hope you're a wiser person than I was in my youth. Depending on how old you are. If you're older, then probably you're a little bit wiser. If you're younger and you have a temper problem, anger problem, please be smart about your choices. It's just like now that I reflect on it, that was about a couple weeks to a month or so of torment, but it was definitely not worth throwing away, my whole career, all my potential. It just wasn't worth it. So if you are in a case like that, if you have anything like that, I want you to just be wise. Violence does not solve anything. I know it sounds cliche. It sounds like a poster, don't do violence. It's wrong. But I'm telling you, like, I genuinely had a choice there to act out on my instinct or act out of like thinking of tomorrow. And I'm so glad. I'm so grateful now as my future self. I'm so grateful that my dumb self didn't act out as foolish as it wanted to. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. That's the end of part 1. Let's go ahead and talk about part 2 in the next video and part 3, because strangely enough, part 1 leaks into part 2 and also leaks into part 3. All right. If you don't know who I am, my name is Lawrence. I'm a guy who's been in the video game industry for about a minute. I was a QA tester, a video game tester for over a decade. If you're curious about more about my experience or my life or who I am, I do have a free course down below. Go ahead and check it out, enroll. It's not going to cost you anything. If you like this video, if this brought you any value, go ahead and subscribe, leave a comment, ask me any questions. I'd love to answer them. And I'll see you guys in part 2.